I have so many things to do.
Yeah.
एक और मुसीबत क्यों लेनी है?
But it's not a musibat, firstly. And just like everything else, you have to spend some time in the beginning, if you are not already aware, just being aware what is it about managing money. And it's again not rocket science. Once you have kind of made yourself aware, we learn so many things, right? We are not born being able to cook. Nobody, not man, not woman, is born understanding how to manage money. What if that man himself does not understand money? But men can't admit it, right? Which man will admit to you that मुझे नहीं समझ में आ रहा है, आप कर लो भाई. Open, honest, transparent communication. It's not. Trust issues happen if you're not communicating openly. When you sit down and communicate openly, I'm not saying that these kind of choices don't come with their own kind of, impact on other aspects. They will. But again, if you are making this choice with full awareness, full communication, you are able to come up with solutions to those problems that may come after. You're not going to blame anybody because you have sat down and made a choice and communicated with your partner clearly about that choice. So this is very important. So the thing is, I think the way we approach it, and for women, hence, it's important to first build that awareness. What is out there that you can do with your money? Yes, saving, budgeting, that's first. Investments, right? That's what you're really asking your spouse, that what do we have? What are our assets? First, understand what net worth means. Understand it. What is net worth? Understand what are your investment options. Understand what insurance is. Why do you need it? Then sit with your husband and instead of asking questions, go to them and say that, look, I have come to know about equity mutual funds and I have studied it and I have understood this. And I feel like, large cap equity funds or large and mid cap equity funds or flexi cap equity funds are like, the first step into investing if we want to do equity investing. Do we have any? Why can't we have that conversation? Or, you know what, I'm a bit worried about our family's financial future, and I have just learned that term life insurance is the cheapest way to hedge a financial kind of adversity, just in case something happens to you. God forbid, I don't want that to happen, but just in case, do we have term life insurance about our family's financial future? And I have just learned that term life insurance is the cheapest way to hedge a financial kind of adversity.
Hello all, welcome to another edition of This or That. Today our guest is Lisa Pallavi Barbora. She is certified financial coach with over 20 years of experience in personal finance. She has recently written a book on women taking control of their finances. Book is named Money and Her. Book covers 15 real life stories of how women have taken control. So I want to thank Lisa and welcome her to our podcast. Hi Lisa.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for very much for your time. So we can start from your book itself.
Sure.
Over 20 years of your experience, what motivated you, or what specific stories motivated you to write this book? What, and specifically for women?
So I've been in personal finance, all my professional life. And for quite a bit of it, more than 12, 13 years, it's been in the space of writing, because I started with Mint and I was with them for 8, 9 years. So I was writing on personal finance for a long time. And then even if after I left them, I've been an independent professional, but that continues. So writing really is my kind of key area of taking this whole personal finance experience and putting it out there. So I've always kind of wanted to write something on personal finance in a book format. Last few years, I've been, while I've been an independent professional, I've been working also as a financial coach, right? And before that, I did some writing around women and money for one of my clients. And as a coach, I have held these kind of workshops with women, sessions with women for money, because we know that in general in society, women haven't really stepped up on this front. So, women do a lot. Women have started earning. There is that whole thing is there, but managing money is still not something that most women have kind of taken control of, or taken the initiative to independently address. So in these sessions, I kind of came across a lot of reluctance, a lot of hesitation towards this. And this was just something that I was thinking, how do I help women get rid of this hesitation?
Mhm.
And you know
So, what is this hesitation? If you could talk about a bit.
So this hesitation is really, it's very simple. It's really numbers, okay? And I've heard it in professional settings. I've heard it in social settings. When women, when we're in the session, or when I'm talking, say, in a dinner party, even, of what I do, uh, the response is always, wow, we don't get numbers. Can't wrap our heads around that. That is something I can't do. That's the first level one hesitation. Level two hesitation is perhaps if the father or the husband is already doing this, then it's like, okay, he's already doing it. How do I, get myself into it? Because he feels that I don't trust him if I ask too many questions. That's level two hesitation. Level three hesitation is that, women are not, a lot of women, either stop their earning lives or don't begin their earning lives because of responsibilities around the family. And, responsibility around the family also sometimes is work, right? There's a lot of stuff you need to do, which is not necessary caregiving out of love. It is chores around the house. That's also work. But the way society functions is we don't recognize that as work that probably deserves any kind of monetary compensation for various reasons, because then marriage becomes transactional, and I've spoken about some of this in the book as well. But so I've heard terms like, I feel guilty because I'm not earning. How can I ask my husband? Or I feel really small because when I ask about, questions around money, um, I'm judged for it. Or, you start looking like a gold digger. So you don't want to
No,
get
but
into that.
women who are earning themselves, who are making their own money, uh, they also don't take interest
Yeah,
in.
that's the numbers part. I told you that's the first.
So there is
That's the first
other
level
than number,
hesitation.
is there any self-limiting belief that you've observed because of which they think they don't want to
That this is
participate?
not their area of expertise.
Mm-hmm.
This is not what women should be doing, or that I am already doing so many things.
Hmm.
Even if the woman is earning, by and large, in most families, and I'm saying families again and again because there are a lot of single women as well. But when your family is slightly larger, responsibilities are larger. And by and large, in most families, and that is changing now, but by and large, women take on that extra responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you are earning, but you're also managing the needs of the household. Many a times that household is not restricted to a nuclear family, but also includes parents. Or even if the household itself doesn't include parents, there are parents involved. The woman's parents are involved, the husband's parents are involved. So that kind of responsibility of care also falls a lot on women's shoulders. And that's just how society works. There's no right or wrong or judgment in this, but that's just how society functions. So that other belief is there that, if I'm already doing so much, this is something I do not want to add to my plate. It's extra work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But it's not work. It is basic hygiene. Okay. And you need, so just like, going out there, financial independence is considered as earning. And if you go through my book, you'll realize that financial independence in its entirety is not earning money. It is actually managing your money, being aware of what is happening with your money, and is it actually serving you as an individual and as a part of a larger family. And the third thing is that It's boring. It's
So,
so boring. Why should I do it?
yeah. So then, how and why would you recommend for them to take charge? So it's a very typical barrier. I have so many things to do.
Yeah.
एक और मुसीबत क्यों लेनी है?
But it's not a musibat, firstly.
हाँ,
And just like everything else, you have to spend some time in the beginning. If you're not already aware, just being aware, what is it about managing money?
हम्म,
And it's again not rocket science. Once you have kind of made yourself aware, we learn so many things, right? We are not born being able to cook. Nobody, not man, not woman, is born understanding how to manage money.
mhm,
It's not a talent, right? Some people are good at singing, gala acha hai. Some people are good at tennis. They have a good, hand in racket sports. This is not a talent. Nobody is born with it. Everybody learns it. Why do women think that men are inherently better at this?
mhm,
In fact, I argue that by doing that, you may be pushing your spouse or your father or your brother or your brother in law, whoever it is, into the deep end. What if that man himself does not understand money? But men can't admit it, right? Which man will admit to you that मुझे नहीं समझ में आ रहा है, आप कर लो भाई, to the woman in the house? It happens very rarely. And I feel that by again, it's not another thing women are adding to, because yes, then the argument is that but men don't do all these other things that women do in terms of managing the house, managing their work. The mind space is very less. Yes, but again, going back to that, the initial awareness is not rocket science. It's not math. I think that is a big myth, that managing your money is about knowing numbers, is about knowing math. It is about the basic functioning of assets and what return risk kind of dynamics they have. But that is not hard to know, and once you know it, you don't have to sit and do it yourself. Firstly, there are advisors to help you through it, but you need to know the right questions to ask your advisor. You need to know what are the assets which can help you attain your life's aspirations. Have you ever tried to align your money with your life's aspirations? Have you ever done that exercise? That exercise is not work. That exercise is you looking into what you want from life, right? And just matching what you do with your money with that goal. um, it's just about sitting down with your partner and an advisor and participating in that discussion with the knowledge that you have acquired about how assets function. You don't have to get into the math
So
beyond a
is
certain
that the
point.
reason you wrote your book around stories and not financial rules or financial framework?
See, I was, as I was telling you, I was doing these workshops with women, financial literacy awareness, as you may call it. And there was extreme reluctance. And there is this whole, once you sit and talk to a small group of women, then you realize the issues, right? And they want to, they
Mhm.
want to do this. But that there is firstly a whole belief system, the beliefs we spoke about, that's stopping them subconsciously. They don't even know it, and it's stopping them. Secondly, there are practical issues around being able to challenge, I mean, looking at it rather as a challenge, which it shouldn't be, to men. So my idea was firstly that I cannot take more numbers into this space. I was recently at a HR conclave in Bangalore, and there's Dr. Shalini Lal from Uncube, I think her company is.
Mhm.
Um, and she was the keynote speaker, and she said this, that the world is full of complexities. There's a lot of chaos happening, and our minds are not able to absorb that. But when you approach it through coherent stories, that messy complexity becomes easier. And when she was saying this, to my mind, the numbers argument, the argument around relationship trust issues, all that is the messy complexity that women deal with. If I add more numbers to that, it'll just make it messier. So, coherent stories. And she was saying this, and I related so much to, I mean, this was just last week, so the book is already out, but that's exactly what it is. you're
would you,
dealing with all
would you
that.
like to share one of the stories?
So I think I don't want to share one story because,
No.
I say this in my preface as well, that, all the stories are stories of incredible strength, but also a lot of vulnerability. And I would like readers to go through the stories without any bias, without any judgment for these individuals. And hence, I don't want to pick one story, but
So
I'll
maybe
just
not
tell
the
you
story, but
how.
the insight
Yeah, so I'll just tell you
that's
how the book is
inspiring. Yeah.
structured, and that'll give you a sense. So basically, it's about the intersection of life and money, and how these strong, independent minded women have dealt with life circumstances, and why keeping charge of their money has helped them also have the freedom of choice, which is very, very important. Um, because then when you look back, you know that that's a choice I made, and I want to move in this direction in my life. And you can make mistakes, but you're able to own that choice. You're able to then address the mistake. If you keep thinking that somebody has pushed you in a certain direction, then it's harder to kind of take ownership of it. So, the way the book is structured is across life stages. So, there are single women, then the next life stage is marriage, and the dynamics of money and life and the intersection of that in just, our relationship with our spouse. Then the next life stage is children, and again the dynamic of money and, life. So there is one big thing for women comes up in the career break, for example. Women do tend to give up working after they've had a child, with the intention of going back. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. How can you make it work? Even with long career breaks of 6, 7 years, how can you go back to the workforce and have the most successful career after that? And like one of the protagonists has said, that, in a 40-year long career that most people will have, 6, 7 years is nothing. So don't be afraid to do that. We are, a lot of women become afraid also कि, मैं इतना time workforce से बाहर रहूं, they are not going to take me back. Then it'll be harder for me to, work against the men, and, all of those doubts are there. So through these stories, I'm hoping that that courage will be there to spend the time you want with your family and go back to work when you are ready. What can you do in that period that will help you become successful? So that's the third life stage. There are other things, your medical aspects with children. There's the story of an unmarried mother. So, what are her financial aspects? Then the last stage is your venture or your professional life. And women who have managed this along with, the intersection of financial issues. Again, every story is different. There is an intermingling of health, of professional uncertainty, of death, divorce, all of those things, while they are continuing to, and some of these stories are of women who have been pushed to actually, take charge of their money. For example, death is one such aspect, and we have heard of hundreds of stories where if your spouse who has, been managing money, and because of an untimely death, you're suddenly faced with sometimes debt which you didn't know existed, sometimes difficulty with relatives in claiming some of the assets, sometimes you just don't know what the assets are because you've never bothered to have this conversation with your spouse. So managing money doesn't necessarily mean that you are, you have a separate account from your spouse or anything, but that you are aware of the financial assets, liabilities, net worth that impacts you and your family. And you have some role in deciding what happens to it.
Mhm.
That's the basic.
That's a very nice insight. That is not just about you doing the investments yourself, but you should understand family finances, where money
Yeah.
is, so you can deal with. On this, I have one question. So you are saying that there are a lot of stories where women are pushed to manage finances. So I mean, then you don't have choice, right? But when you don't, when it's a happy scenario and one person is managing the money, how do you deal with the psychological aspect of the fact that it's a transactional thing, right? So uh, do you think it could cause different dynamics if you separate your money and you want to deal it separately? What would you want to have? You covered something in your book, or what is your view? How do you take away the transactional aspect and make this discussion meaningful between the couples?
So some of it is there in the book. There is one very interesting story about a couple where both husband and wife are earning very well, but and they've kind of chosen to focus on their career. Okay, but when they have their child, which is after several years of marriage, things change. Your family dynamics change, and with a child, they realize that one parent needs to be more available, and both of them are on rising paths in their careers. Both of them have good kind of career reports. Obviously, in a regular setup, the woman gives up her work, and like we were talking about career breaks, those kind of things happen. Here her husband did. Now I will leave it to the reader to go through what how they came to this conclusion, but basically it was about taking a decision around what they need to do. They were able to do it for two reasons. Firstly, that financially they were both well settled. They had the cushion that they needed for one partner to not bring in active income. Secondly, communication.
Mm-hmm.
Open, honest, transparent communication. It's not trust issues happen if you're not communicating openly. When you sit down and communicate openly, I'm not saying that these kind of choices don't come with their own kind of, impact on other aspects. They will. But again, if you're making this choice with full awareness, full communication, you are able to come up with solutions to those problems that may come after. You're not going to blame anybody because you have sat down and made a choice and communicated with your partner clearly about that choice. So, this is very important. Awareness is important, which will help you build that financial cushion, and communication is important. And we don't think about these things as financial issues, but let me tell you, it's the foundation of your personal finance to be aware and to communicate well with your family. But I want to tell you one thing, and you brought it up. So now the book has been out for about a month, and already I am having conversations with women who have read it and gone back to their husbands to ask questions. And they have come back saying, I asked this question around, I need to know what is there, and you need to share with me. And he was dismissive. I got irritated. We had a fight, and, it got left there. Um, and this is not one person. I've heard it from multiple people who have read the book, and obviously people I know who have come back to me and said, I asked, but we got into a fight. Now this is a real life situation. This is a real life outcome of people reading the book, of women reading the book, understanding the importance of financial awareness with regards to family finances and taking that step. Now is it wrong then, or should they not have done it? Because obviously marital peace is something which is important as well. We cannot have this at the cost of that. So I think that's where, and I was thinking about this after they came back, that what does one do then if your husband starts feeling like you're not trusting them? So the thing is, I think the way we approach it, and for women, hence, it's important to first build that awareness. What is out there that you can do with your money? Yes, saving, budgeting, that's first. Investments, right? That's what you're really asking your spouse, that what do we have? What are our assets? First, understand what net worth means.
Mhm.
Understand it. What is net worth? understand what are your investment options, understand what insurance is, why do you need it. Then sit with your husband and instead of asking questions, go to them and say that, look, um, I have come to know about equity mutual funds and I have studied it and I have understood this. And I feel like, large cap equity funds or large and mid cap equity funds or flexi cap equity funds are like, the first step into investing if we want to do equity investing. Do we have any?
Uh,
Why can't we have that conversation? Or, you know what, I'm a bit worried about our family's financial future. And I have just learned that term life insurance is the cheapest way to hedge a financial kind of adversity, just in case something happens to you. God forbid, I don't want that to happen, but just in case, do we have term life insurance? Let's have more informed conversations,
Rather
less
than
challenging conversations, because it's not, you don't want to take control against your spouse. You want to make a collaborative effort, just like you do in other spheres of life. Why not in money as well? Make it collaborative, right? So I'm just sharing something I came across very recently. So
no, no, it's very interesting because that's the thing, right? It shouldn't be an integration. What
yeah,
is, it should be like trying to understand, and it has to be a right perspective in terms of why you are asking.
right.
So it's good. So you talked about two, three things they should know. I was going through your videos, and I came across the five numbers that
Okay.
women should know. So what would you like to talk about these five things that women should know?
So the five basic things
Yeah.
and what come to mind, and I'm hoping it matches what you read, but obviously you need to know your family income. So the reason we are talking about these five things, also let me bring that into, or the reason I bring it up in my sessions, is because women always say, like we discussed, that I don't get numbers. And what I want to break the myth that it is not about numbers. These five things are what you need to know as far as your personal finances are concerned, and these are not difficult numbers. So firstly, you need to know your family income. Okay, how much you are earning, how much your husband is earning, the family income. um, if you're single, then obviously your income and where other sources are coming from, interest, this, that, etc. A lot of, I've come across in my professional kind of work, while writing on stories for Women's Day, etc., and in talking to peers as well, a lot of times in double income families, spouses don't know each other's income. They don't have access to each other's bank accounts. It's a choice, but as far as your family expenses are concerned, then if you don't want to share your entire income, think of it as a Venn diagram, as I say. So there is your income, your husband's income, and then there is a family expense requirement, that little shaded part where things overlap. At least that has to be completely transparent. What are you contributing to the family pool, right? So that's income. Then you need to know your expenses or savings. It's a derivative, which is very, very important. You need to know inflation. We are often saving, and those savings lie in our bank account. And you feel like my bank balance is growing, and that's great, which is great because it means you are disciplined about how much you're spending and how much you're saving. However, money lying in the bank account is actually sort of devaluing. The value of that money is becoming lesser by the day because of something called inflation. In India, our average inflation is roughly 5 to 6% annually, which means every year prices of a standard basket of goods and services, things we spend on, goes up by 5% or 6%. That's what we've been seeing. Bank savings account gives you 3%, 3.5%. The regular, SBIs of the world, and SBI is the largest kind of savings bank account holder in India. So, which means your 100 rupees in 1 year is earning 3.5%. But because of inflation, because prices are going up, your 100 rupees will no longer buy that much. It will buy worth 94, right? So it's devaluing by 6%, but you're earning only 3%. So actually, net net, you're losing. So you have to understand inflation. You have to understand assets. And lastly, you have to understand your liabilities, which then gets you to something called a net worth. So when you want to create wealth, everyone wants to create wealth, right? You need to know what assets you have, of course. And you'll think, my house is worth this much, I have this much in whatever FDs. So this is my worth. But that is not the correct way to look at it. And for that reason, you need to know your liabilities. Because yes, you have a house which is worth, 1 crore, 2 crore, whatever. आजकल तो उससे कम में कुछ house होता ही नहीं है. But you may have a housing loan against that. So if something happens, or you sell that house, or your job goes, and you have to, work on selling that asset, you'll have to repay that loan, na? So 2 crore का value तो है, but उसमें 1 crore का loan है. Really, you're worth only that 2 minus 1, which is 1 crore. So that's it. If you know this much, you
income, expense,
income,
inflation,
yeah,
assets,
liabilities. You can negotiate the money you have. Okay, you can negotiate where that incremental money needs to go. If your expenses are exceeding your income, you see, when you have this in front of you and you see, okay, my expenses are exceeding my income, then you will automatically start to slow down. Once you know inflation, which is a very important number, you'll automatically bring out your savings and put it in investments which are beating inflation. Liabilities, again, very important to know, and certain details within that, not just kitna hai, but what is the interest rate, what is the tenure. These are some things that you need to get into a little bit. But these are not hard numbers. इसमें कुछ hard तो नहीं है ना, and it's like basic. इतना तो पता होना चाहिए. I know it's easier said than done, because I do hear of very successful professional women who are given, even today, they are given an amount. I understand, I might be wrong, but I think women save. That part they take care of. But how do they become investors? And what are the different investment products they should understand? Yeah, so you're right. Women are savers. So that is not an issue. But like I said, saving is not enough because of inflation. Also, the second aspect is financial well being, right? When we talk about financial well being, it is your financial health today. So, do you have enough to spend on the things you need and some of your wants and indulgences today? But also, are you able to use the money that you have today for your future financial security? So, investments need to be understood for these two reasons: inflation and your future financial security. Now, how do they move from being savers to being investors, or at least understanding what investments are? So, the easiest way to do this is actually thinking about what kind of financial objectives you may have as an individual and as a unit of part of a family unit. So as an individual, you may have certain goals, right? So for example, and since we are talking about women in a bit, let me just, take that example. You're earning and you're about to get married, etc. And you know that, you may take a career break, or you're already married and you know that you're going to take a career break as and when you have a child. So you have to, that's a life goal. What is the financial goal around that? The financial goal around that is that you should have some money saved up such that you are able to, keep your, kind of financial needs addressed as you were before you took the break. So this, and it doesn't affect, if it is affecting a double income family, then, you're able to contribute something into the pot still, even if you are not working. So then you start saving. If you know, okay, roughly 2 years, 3 years, then you start saving accordingly. So that is one way of beginning. Look at your goals. Now, when we look at our goals, so the timelines will differ, right? Retirement is also a goal, but that is could be like 20 years away. So the thumb rule is that when your goals are closer, you have to look at assets which are more stable in terms of their returns. And when your goals are slightly longer term, far away, then you can start thinking of what we call growth assets, where your wealth is actually compounding and the returns are beating inflation. In the short term, for short term goals, what we are saying, which when they're closer to you, we're not so bothered about inflation because it's harder to beat on a year on year basis. You have to understand the higher return you are seeking, the more risk you'll be taking, because return doesn't come for free. Somebody is doing something to generate that return. So that's going to involve some risk, right? So in the short term, we can't be so bothered about beating inflation as we are going to be bothered about capital safety, because you know for sure that those salme I need this money. So if you put it in an asset which is volatile, or if there is high risk in that, then you may lose capital, so you don't want that. So that's number one. Think about what are you going to use your surplus income. Actually, rule number one is really spend less than you earn, right? That's how you're going to have surplus income. And then what do you do with that surplus income? What do you want to achieve with it? So put down those goals, and it can be as small as 2 years later I want to go on a 1 month tour to Europe. It can be just that. But what's important is you put down the goal itself, you put down a rough timeline and a rough estimate of how much you may need. For things which are closer, it's easier to have an estimate value. For things which are 20 years away, like retirement, you won't have an estimate value, but okay, you will put aside some amount of your income. Again, a rule of thumb, if you are completely clueless about where to begin, is the 50-30-20 rule, which can become 60-30-10, whatever, but have some kind of proportion which helps you. So the biggest proportion is that the income that is coming in, or your family income, 50 to 60%, or whatever that number is, let's stick with 50, goes into your needs. So things like house rent or EMI, your groceries, utilities, whatever expenses you have which you cannot do without. 30% of it goes into some kind of extras. So you'll have things like fees, you'll have things like going out, entertainment, holidays, whatever. Everything goes into that 30%. And then the 20% you must invest. I'm not going to say save, but you must invest. Split it into stable return versus growth, depending on whether a larger proportion of your goals are closer or further away. Before you invest, so we've spoken about two things here. Firstly, save more, spend less than you earn. And secondly, we've spoken about have some goals around what you want. If you're single and you have no goals, matlab, theek your income is enough that it caters to all these near term closer things, then just save for your future. And then it can just be a growth kind of goal, right? I just want to grow my money, I want to create wealth. That is also a goal. The third thing is that before you begin all this, have a sense of money that you can keep aside for emergencies. Very, very important that before you get into long term wealth creation, in the fourth gear, first build an emergency fund, because we don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. I mean, look at the world that we live in today, and it's as uncertain as it gets. And this is after we are coming out of a 2 year period of high uncertainty not so long ago with COVID. And now we are, it seems like the world order is changing with what's happening with US and China. So we don't know what's going to happen. Keep money aside for emergencies, which can be roughly 9 to 12 months of your non-negotiable expenses. Keep that money in some kind of stable return investment. Stable return investments mean things like fixed deposits, things like liquid funds from the mutual fund umbrella. those are fairly easily accessible, fairly stable. Go for quality, that's important in any investment. So keep that aside. Make sure that you are getting some kind of insurance for hedging other risks which can be hedged through insurance. Firstly, your health. Medical expenses are also, they can crop up anytime. And medical inflation, we spoke about inflation, price rise every year. Medical inflation is 8 to 10%, not 6%. So every year you are going to be paying more for things like hospitalization, medicines, doctor visits, all of that. So get a good comprehensive policy in place. It's quite inexpensive to get medical insurance. So it's a no brainer, really, because then that big chunk of your savings doesn't get used into some kind of a medical emergency because the insurance will pay for it. And if you have dependents who can be impacted if something happens to you, then you must have a term life insurance policy. These two are must. Along with that, things like home insurance, car insurance, depending on your life stage and what whether your home is an asset or has assets in it and stuff like that will matter. So these are the three things that you need to know. The fourth thing is that how do you structure the investments? As I said, for things which are closer, you need stable return, which is fixed deposits, liquid funds. These are the two that are the easiest to do. People do look at slightly longer term securities like the NSC certificates, the National Savings Certificate, or post office or PPF. Yes, those returns are by and large secure because the government is behind that. However, you know roughly 15-20 years ago, the returns themselves were much higher. Right now we are looking at a range of 7 to 7.5% after tax. PPF is not tax, but the others are after tax. That amounts to you're pretty much at inflation level. Okay. PPF is not taxed, but again, it's at 7.1%. And it's a lock in of 7 years. Even these other things are lock ins of 6 and 7 years. So they're not really addressing your closer term issues. They are addressing the capital safety and long term debt allocation, but they do not address your closer term issues. And you have to think 15 years, how much money do you want locked in at 7.1%, knowing that inflation is, 6, around 6%. So you're really earning, real return is 1%. So you have to think through that. For your growth oriented investments, so there are two asset classes, basic asset classes, which address growth. Which one is property, one is equity. 20-25 years ago, property was more popular, equity was not, because the access was like that. You could take, even now you can, but basically you would take a loan easily, but equities में इतना पता नहीं था कि कहाँ जाना है, क्या लेना है, कौन सा form fill करना है, share certificates. It's all very confusing. Today, access to equities is very, very simple. You can open an account within half an hour online and start buying if you want. If you know stocks, then you may want to indulge in that. But more importantly, for the average person, access to managed funds like mutual funds is very easy, and you can start with 1,000 rupees, 5,000 rupees. So you don't need chunky amounts. The issue with property is that you need chunky amounts. So unless you have that, you'll take a loan. Then you're not really buying an asset, you're also creating a liability. But with equity, you don't need that. You can also regularize it through systematic investment plans. Broking houses also offer systematic investment. So, if for the average person who can't spend too much time on their investments, mutual funds work great. You do not need to venture into stocks, even though it may seem more exciting. For your basic wealth creation, mutual funds which invest in equity work great. For 8 to 10 years plus exposure, definitely retirement makes sense through this route. There are other products available like the National Pension Scheme, which has also got some equity exposure, but it's not as flexible. Even a ULIP is not as, although it will give you that equity, long-term equity exposure, it's not as flexible and as a equity mutual fund, which you can, add at very easily. You can take out if some big emergency comes in, and you have the ability to choose very simply. So, 5 years later, if you want a different one, you can move there. And, when you are done at maturity, 20, even if it is 10 years or 20 years away, you are able to withdraw the entire thing or partially at the most efficient tax rate, long term capital gains tax, which is the most efficient really today. So that is what is available to you. Uh, and you have to think through. The question comes where people need money in 5 6 years. That becomes a little tricky because you don't want, you want to beat inflation a little bit. 5 saal kafi hota hai. So there you make a blend. These blends are available pre-packaged with mutual funds. They are called hybrid funds, where they have a little bit of debt and a little bit of equity, and they will not give you complete equity compounding, but they will give you some capital protection as well. So those can be addressed, or if you have a good advisor, they can help you build your own kind of blend. So practically, actually, everything can be addressed through mutual funds itself. But if people want those other securities, then all of that other stuff that we spoke about is also available.
I'll just summarize this. So you're saying you should save, you should create emergency funds, you should have goals. Now the goals could be short term, long term. So we have products for short term, we have products for long term,
Right.
and short term also we could have just immediate short 1 year, 2 year, 5 year. So 1 2 years we should have fixed deposit, liquid funds kind of stuff. For 5 6 years we should have a blend, and for a longer term we should look at growth oriented assets, which can happen through equity and mutual
Yeah.
funds, right?
Yes.
Great. So with respect to women participating in investments and taking charge of their finances, there are two questions that I would like you to address. One is that if women are uh, investing on their own, should they have a separate will, or have you covered that in your book, or what are your thoughts on that? And secondly, generally when I could be wrong, but generally when people talk about retirement planning, is it like if both partners are investing, it should be like as a unit thing, or it should be a separate thing with respect to retirement planning?
Okay. So, the answer to these questions really ventures into relationship areas. To your first
But
question,
before you answer, I think that's where this whole thing gets complicated, or rather, where the dynamics play out in couples. See, one you gave in initial example that when they are put in a situation where they don't have a choice, they will manage. But when they do have a choice, where this dynamics play out, where it really depends on what the relationship is.
So what the book does have some stories where the dynamics between the two spouses um, plays out very well, despite the woman taking care of the investment decisions. What I can tell you, I can't tell you how one should manage their relationship, but what I can tell you is why those dynamics work out well is because they communicate, because it's transparent, open communication. It doesn't mean that all investments are in joint names. That is not the case always. But both partners know what is there. Now, different people will choose different ways of managing money, even if there are, you know, two people who are working or earning. You may choose investments in joint names and nomination, etc. You may choose to keep your investments separate, maybe because you have a sibling to take care of or aging parents to take care of. And often women especially are not very comfortable asking if they are earning, asking their husbands to fund their parents. Again, this is a society thing, because the other way around, it doesn't work like that, right? But that's fine. What impacts, and I spoke about this earlier, what impacts the family needs to be, at least that much needs to be communicated and transparent. If you don't want to communicate on the rest of it, it's your choice. But what is impacting the household and the family, which means children, that much needs to be communicated. Again, retirement also is a choice, right? Do you want to live together and have a joint retirement, or you want to live separately and have separate lives? Everything can be addressed with open communication. Why are we afraid of asking questions which matter? That is really the thing. There is a story where the couple is very successful and both are owning, both are earning well, but they have investment. They don't have joint investments. They are nominees in each other's investments. They don't have joint investments, but they have found a way where they compile everything on a Google list, and their close relatives have access to that if something happens to them. So there is transparency, and as you see, there is communication. Often, if you haven't followed transparency and communication from the beginning of your relationship, it can become difficult, which is also what we spoke about, the fights, right? It can become difficult to pick up now. I'm not the right person to say how you can deal with that. But what I have done in the book is included some male perspective from husbands of some of these women to show you, the reader, that there is definite benefit when the woman is financially independent in its entirety, which means she is also participating in money decisions, if not making those money and investment decisions for the family, and just kind of keeping her husband informed. There is benefit. And those men will tell you, because that's included in the book, what that benefit is. So I encourage people to have an open mind about this, and approach it in that sense. Wills are important regardless of whether you're a man or a woman. If you have assets which are solely in your name, you need a will, so that the transmission of those assets in case something happens to you is smooth for those who are dependent on you, or for those who you want should benefit once you are not there. So will is important if you have assets which you have singularly in your name. So that is an ownership thing, really, not a gender.
And retirement bit, saying there should be separate retirement plans.
So, as I said, retirement is really what you choose to do, right? And if after retirement you want to have separate lives, you will have a separate. Then you don't want to go back to your spouse and for everything discuss ki ab kya kare, because that need of securing your family may not be there. Your children may be already financially independent, right? So that is then just your dynamic with your spouse. But if if your retirement outcome is that you have a shared life even after retirement, then definitely both spouses need to be involved to the and their incomes need to be, or rather their investments at that stage need to be known to the extent that your shared life is impacted. The thing is that women live longer than men. That's a kind of proven scientific thing. Now, when you're doing that, and those are the years where there is no income, and if you're really unaware, and this is for women more than for men, if you're really unaware about the family financial situation, what are you going to do at that stage? Then you want to start building knowledge. That's going to be really hard. There are many, many elderly women in cities where they are cash poor, asset rich, because you have that big bungalow or whatever, and you want to leave that for your children. You don't have any money, so you're asking your children, because you've never bothered to look into family financial issues or think about how you're going to fund your retirement, or years where income is really not there, but you're happy with that big asset. You're reluctant to sell it because this is the legacy that my husband left for my child, but you continue to live without enough cash, you know because of this reason. There are hundreds of stories like this. These can very well be addressed with open communication at the time of retirement, before retirement, when both spouses are in good mental health to make these choices. Why not move into a smaller space, but create kind of liquidity that will sustain even the spouse's retirement if the male member is no longer there. So this is what I mean by communication. These are the things that you need to be talking about. So yeah, that's I think that's one way to kind of look at it if you're going to have a shared retirement.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for the conversation. Before we conclude, would you want to say something to inspire women to take actions or?
I you know I Money and Her is a nudge for all women to start thinking about this slightly differently. Just going out there and earning your money is not financial independence for sure. But more than that, I think we don't talk enough about money. And the content, we are talking about money today, but the content in everyday discussions is not money. We talk about money, but the context in a lot of things is money. And let's not shy away from that. Women more so than men, because we have kept ourselves away from it for a long time. So when we want that balance to come back, the seesaw is a little imbalanced. We may go to that other extreme, but it's not about challenging the men. It's about having a collaborative effort in recognizing the role that money plays in the well-being of your life, in creating an identity for yourself in all aspects, and definitely how it helps you and your family. If you don't have that awareness, at some stage you will feel that gap. And as we keep talking, the knowledge gap is easy to bridge. Let's first work on our mindset and changing that.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks a
Lisa, for
lot.
your time.
Thanks a lot.